Canada is generally known for politeness, slightly more potent beer, and disguising cake as coffee.
Double, double.
But there was a time when Canada was a wee bit tougher and took Europe's security seriously. Back then, Canada used to actually flex when it came to defense spending. And for a very brief period of time, Canada's Air Force had a nuclear strike mission. Crazy, right? Canadian pilots once stood on 5-minute alert ready to unleash thermonuclear weapons. I bet you didn't know that. Hell, most Canadians don't know that. It's like this time has been erased from the collective memory. I find it fascinating. So, for this build, I'm going to make Canada's only nuclear strike aircraft, the CF-104 Starfighter, or as I like to think of it, Canada's big boy pants. This model is a Kinetic CF-104. The gold box version comes stuffed with plastic and a small sheet of photo etch. It's got some excellent decals letting builders choose between the earlier natural metal destroyer of worlds or a later green camouflage destroyer of tarmacs and office buildings. The only things missing for my build were an appropriate B-28 gravity bomb, and I'll get to that in a minute, and a center bomb rack. I got one of those as a 3D print from Hypersonic. So, let's build this thing. I wanted to punch up the kit cockpit a little with a C2 seat from Wolfpack. It was both period correct and designed to fit in the Kinetic 104 kits. Now, this is an old school poured resin part, so I had to cut off the pour block. I do this on a coffee filter or a paper towel, as I want to catch and get rid of as much of the nasty resin dust as possible. Also, wear a mask when cutting through this stuff. Once free from the pour block, I make myself a toothpick painting handle and jam it up the bottom side. This makes painting the seat far easier. Let's take a look at the real thing. This C2 seat isn't all that dazzling, is it? But that means it'll be a little easier to paint. Turning back to the resin seat, I started out by spraying medium gray. Then I picked out various raised bits with a lighter shade of the medium gray. I then painted the headrest and the cushion. I'll put a list of all the paints I used in the video description. Unfortunately, the footage of me expertly and precisely painting the harness was lost. Or more likely, I forgot to press record. But I assure you, those painting sequences were epic. But I did get some final shots of the seat before it was installed. All in all, I think the seat was a worthwhile upgrade, and it was not expensive. The rest of the cockpit went together very easily. Everything got painted in medium gray. I then masked and painted the panels Nato black. These were dry brushed with Citadel paint. I then picked out the knobs and switches with white paint. And I finished by painting the radar scope in white, followed by clear green paint. Once finished, it all fit together like a Swiss watch. And if we compare it to the real thing, the kit cockpits comes as close as you can get. But before we can tuck it into the fuselage, there are a few other bits that need to be prepared and painted. This includes the gear bays, which in RCAF service, at least during this era, these were painted in silver or were bare metal. So that's easy peasy. After that, the fuselage halves were closed up and there were no gaps. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about the installation of various panels on the underside or after the air intakes. For whatever reason, there were plenty of gaps to be found there. Yet, the speed brakes fit in precisely. Go figure. Now, I avoid putty as much as I avoid sales guys who call me bruh. So these gaps were filled in by gluing in thin pieces of scrap styrene strip and sheet. And then I cut them down, and then I sand them smooth. This is the fastest method of closing gaps, and since everything is in plastic, once the surface is smooth, it's easily rescribed. I finished the fuselage work by gluing on the nose cone and then the cover over the gun trough. Nuclear strike zippers did not have much use for a gun. To prepare for the painting stage, I masked the cockpit and the canopies. A few months ago, I took advantage of kit masks made to order surface. I mailed them the Kinetic canopy, and they sent me back 2 sets. And what do I think? I love them. They were perfectly cut on the sheet, they fit perfectly, and most importantly, they stayed on. I show the entire bare metal finish painting process for this zipper in another video. I used a gloss black lacquer as a primer, and over that, I painted the model with Vallejo metal colors. This got me a bulletproof bare metal finish that will stand up to any masking. That video has some other tips, plus there are a lot of shiny models to look at, and as always, you get my buttery smooth voice. So there's a lot to like. To see it, you can click the link above, or wait till the end of this video, and I'll have another link ready for you. While the paint was drying, I put the B-28 bomb together. I got this aftermarket bomb from Mike Belcher as part of his CF-104 weapons set. There are pore blocks to deal with, and I started by snipping the corners off. The rest I cut off outside using the razor saw. Luckily for me, once the parts are cleaned up, the nose and the tail bits snap perfectly on the physics package. I only had to scratch build the fins with some styrene sheet and install them on the body. While there are plenty of pictures of practice bombs, finding a picture of an actual B-28 installed on a Canadian 104 is right up there with the Holy Grail. I believe these things were either bare metal or they were finished in some sort of silver paint, so I went with that. Now for the decals, and I'm not going to lie to you. This model builder has trust issues with kit decals. But this kit came with a nice sheet printed by Cartograph. They are as good as any high-end aftermarket sheet. The decals are nice and thin. The printing and colors look great, but most importantly, these decals behave. They do as they're told, and they sank into the panel lines and surface detail with little help from me. Other than the gaps I mentioned before, the only other issue I ran into were the punch-outs on the landing gear. I wanted to fill these in. Now, there are some modelers who believe in the putty solution, and yeah, depending on how shallow they are, putty can fix punch-outs. But these were a little deeper, and curiously, matched the diameters of a couple of my punches. Just a few taps gave me teeny styrene pucks, and these were glued into the punch-outs, and once the glue had dried, they were sanded smooth, painted silver, and given a black Tamiya panel liner wash to bring out the detail. And that's about it. There were a few small bits to add on during the final assembly, but now the CF-104 was complete. I ended up mounting the B-28 with mounting pins I made out of brass rod, so that thing is secure as it gets. The F-104 is a Cold War icon, and out of all of the pointy silver planes of the 1950s, the Starfighter has got to be the pointiest and most silvery of the bunch. The Canadian Starfighter also represents an odd time when Canada was a very different place. If you're interested in finding out more about Canada's nuclear strike mission, you can hear it firsthand from a former CF-104 pilot on the Cold War Conversations podcast. That's episode 369. I'll put a link to that in the video description. Overall, the Kinetic kit was fun to build and fun to paint. There were a few challenges to the build, but they were easy to fix with just some spare styrene. I would definitely build another. Thanks for watching the video until the end. I really hope you like it. Until next time, keep building models and keep taking risks.